Yeah, it looks the RTX 50 lines aren't even like GPUs. I mean, they are, but the development here is the AI bullshit. Fake frame AI generation. Yeah. Don't copyright
RTX, and here's the whole family. Starting from 5070 all the way up to 5090. 5090, twice the performance of a 4090.
I can't wait to play the next like hit indie title with a stylized like almost 2D cell shaded graphical style, you know, and then it looks like dog shit because the NVIDIA AI frame interpolation is giving every deliberate like frame like you know, frame rate choice, just blurring all of it together. Literal hardware engineer here. There's just not anywhere for GPUs to go at this moment hardware-wise. That's fine. It's okay for technology to plateau sometimes. That's normal. That's the... I know we're not used to that in, like, the modern world. That is the normal way it's supposed to work. You're not... It's not normal for technology to get better every, like, 3 months. It's fine for it to just be like, oh, no, yeah, this is basically where GPUs are at right now. You know? Doesn't everyone remember when they did this with televisions? Where for a while after they basically developed, like, the optimal TV, they were like, okay, well, what about, like, 4K? What about 8K? What about holograms? What about 3D? What about... And it's like, no, we'll just take the regular TV, please. And then eventually it just scaled back. And now, because we've accepted what TVs are supposed to be, you can buy a massive TV for $400. Whoa! It turns out when we accept that a technology is plateaued, and we normalize that, the price plummets because it's like, oh yeah, we've basically reached the end game of that tech. Now society can improve because we're not chasing after the newest technological development. Yes, I agree, OLED was a real development, but OLED screens have been here for a while. And even then, like, that's the one bump I'll take, okay? You know what I mean. Yeah, the native performance without the AI interpolation is better on the older hardware. Or almost better. 30% better performance for $2,000, yeah. No, it's not. No, I corrected myself because they flipped which one was which, yeah. But, like, it's basically, it's barely a jump at all.
The more GPUs you buy, the more money you save. That's right. The more GPUs you buy, the more money you save. The more you buy, the more you save. That's right. Performance at 549.
It's so fucked up. I'll keep my 3K series. You know, NVIDIA is worth more money than, like, God right now, right? And it's all because of AI. It's all, like, AI speculation. It's all based on, like, the work they're doing to inject AI into everything. Can we just start optimizing games again, please? No. We'll never optimize games again. Every Unreal 5 game, by default, is going to need AI frame interpolation to run properly. Also, okay, even if the AI can interpolate frames visually, what is that doing for the underlying data? There are games where the code breaks if you're getting less than 60 FPS. Like, there are tons of, like, things in games that tick based on the frame rate. Like, wouldn't that feel weird? If you're artificially boosting the frame rate visually, but the underlying the underlying, like, tick rate is being affected. That's bad game design though. Kind of, but there are things that are supposed to slow down when the frame rate slows down. Like, that's not just a mistake. Like, if your game is supposed to be running at 60 frames per second, but it is running at 23 frames per second, you don't want the game forcing itself to run at 60 FPS at the tick rate that it would, because if that was the case, you'd be, like, stuttering around, and meanwhile a bunch of other shit would be, like, zipping around. Like, you want the game to slow down with you. Modern games don't work that way, but it could fuck up emulation. No, Archrave, I promise you, modern games work that way. 100%. You can change one line in the NEI file to fix that. No, you're not understanding. I'm not talking about, like, the shit that bad developers do where they make it so you move faster when you look down at your feet. I'm talking about... I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. You're really giving away how little you know about this right now. I love it when, like, this especially happens with gaming stuff because people with no accomplishments in their life love to, like, pretend that having watched a few like Unity game dev videos means they have special knowledge on this, when in reality the only thing you have special knowledge on is like taking the trash out when your mom asks you to, okay? You can be mad about it, okay? I know how this shit goes down, all right? This is not like properly integratable tech. This is going to cause real issues. Isn't that literally you? I'll have you know that I beat Elden Ring Shadows of the Erdtree a few days ago. I don't want to hear it. I've actually attended a university course for this. You're the one doing that. If you think that having attended a university course for game development means that you have... If you think that's adding to your credibility in the subject, then boy, do I have words for you. There is no one on earth I would trust less than somebody who has attended a university course for game development. What, couldn't fill out your generals with something a little bit more, I don't know. Are you still in it? Are you waiting for the second one? Come for the king, you best not miss. Yes, games slow tick rate when they don't get the performance they need, but frame rate should be decoupled from the game logic. Frame rate shouldn't be fully decoupled from the game logic, because if the frame rate is lower, the player is experiencing the game at a slower pace. And if they're experiencing the game at a slower pace, that means that other things in the game will need to slow down to accommodate them slowing down, because otherwise you would have a lower frame rate where the interpolation from the AI is causing you to feel like you're playing at a higher frame rate, but because you're not actually playing at a higher frame rate, and those are just visual like frames that it's just like smoothing it out between, that can cause a disconnect. Have you guys never experienced like frame rate issues in a game because there were too many particles that got spawned, and as a consequence of that there were like key behaviors with like if you're moving around with like there are physics objects moving around? Because I know that there's like CPU GPU like a decoupling where the you're talking about like GPU performance smoothing, and the CPU is the one that keeps track of in-game objects, but oftentimes the GPU does reference stuff pulled from the CPU, and the CPU is like relying on that giving you like some kind of feedback. And if there's a like if you're only running a real 20 frames per second but the game thinks you're running at 60 frames per second, it's possible that you miss a tick, like you miss a frame and pulling something from the CPU. Oh God, stop. Are you kidding me? Okay, all right. You know what? It's no, that's fine. You miss frames, not data. The frames contain data because the GPU is pulling information from the CPU, and that information is meant to give you, the player, feedback. The GPU is constructing the way you see the world. So if it misses a frame and it's only interpolating from the data it's pulling from the CPU, there can be a disconnect between what the CPU is trying to provide the GPU and what the GPU is capable of showing you, because it's interpolating with too few. This is basically like the game frame interpolation equivalent of like zombie frames that you get in video encoding. You know, in video encoding where you have like, in order to save data, you have like the zombie frames that like interpolate data from a previous frame rather than having every frame be its own distinct chunk of information. But sometimes if there's too much of a gap between the like real frames, the zombie frames can make people look up. It was like an artifacting glitch that was much more common back like years ago. You're missing keyframes. If you're getting like the GPU equivalent of missing keyframes. Vaush, Marvel Rivals lower frame rate literally causes less movement distance and attacks. Well, Marvel Rivals came out like 30 years ago, so like that doesn't happen in modern games. Holy shit, people in chat being insufferable. This is what happens when you step in their territory. Can you give a game example that might help me understand at least? Okay, there are different kinds of latency, you know? Like, usually the lag that you experience in a game, like say you slash spawn like 50 trillion like objects into the game, the CPU has too much to keep track of, the CPU is angry at you, and to punish you, it doesn't run as fast, okay? It like gives you the cold shoulder. The GPU takes data that's provided by the CPU and uses it to like build the world. Like the CPU runs things one at a time, the GPU uses like parallel threading to try to build out like the environment you interact with. But the actual data, the meaningful data, is stored in the CPU. The problem is, if the game is running slowly enough, if the frame rate is slow enough, the CPU can only send data over to the GPU as fast as the CPU can move through that data. If the frame rate is low, let's say the frame rate plummets to like 15 frames per second when the game is meant to be running at 60 frames per second. The GPU is smoothing the frames so it looks like you're playing at 60 frames per second. Oh, nothing wrong here. You're just playing through normally, 60 frames a second, you know, normal game. But because it's actually running at 15 frames per second, that means for every one real frame of data the GPU is using data provided by the CPU, there are 3 extra frames where the AI is smoothing things through. Now, sometimes that's not an issue if the data that you're getting from the CPU to the GPU is consistent. But if new information is meant to be added to the GPU from the CPU, but the CPU is running too slowly to do that, like at 60 frames a second, or whatever the tick rate is in that case, what you get is that the GPU AI smoothing is going to not have that information, and it's going to interpolate over a gap in the data. So the game feels like it's running smoothly, but you will then have like basically pop in. You're just discussing throughput and bottlenecking. The solution is get a better CPU. I could. Well, I bet that's the solution NVIDIA would like you to, I bet. Yeah, I bet. I have frame rate issues with basically every game that I play, and that's fine. Yes, because you're not using AI to interpolate. You don't... Ooh. Yes, because if your frame rate, if your CPU slows down, the GPU is working with the slowed down data. If the GPU is smoothing between the frames, what you get as a consequence of that is the GPU running like zombie frames, basically, off of the data it's interpolating from the CPU, but you're missing chunks of data from the CPU because it's not able to keep up because it's lagging. So there's a disconnect between the smoothness of your gameplay and how quickly the computer is providing the information that builds the world. This can cause physics issues. If your character is moving at a pace consistent with 60 frames per second gameplay, but the CPU is providing physics-based information, which is what it does every 15 frames per second, that means you can start getting like big breakdowns in physics interactions, or say hitboxes. Yeah, shit can desync because the GPU isn't giving you the data from the CPU at the proper time. At least when the game is just regular lagging, you're getting the GPU data as the CPU data provides for it. Even if it's like 15 frames per second, at least it's a true 15 frames per second, rather than there being a disconnect between the real 15 frames per second and the fake 60 frames per second. But the CPU deals with all the positions and stuff. All the GPU does is render the snapshot of the world state. I can lead you to water, but I can't force you to drink. I don't see how it can actually corrupt the game state. I'm not talking about corrupting. I'm talking... Okay, this is the last thing I'm saying on it, and then we're moving on. Okay, this is the last thing that I'm saying on it. Okay, hold on. Okay, I'm going to get a screenshot from Doom Eternal because I like the game. Okay, imagine you're playing Doom Eternal. So how do the GPU and CPU interact in order to build the game? Okay, so the CPU is good at holding data like basically permanently. The CPU takes the information that builds up the game. How much health does an enemy have? What position is an enemy at? What does the world look like? What are the particle meshes, the physics-based stuff, you know? The CPU holds that. The GPU builds the visual data. I'm simplifying here, that we look at, okay? So the CPU can tell you where this zombie is and what like animation state it's in. The GPU is the one that makes it look like that, gives it the textures, gives it the like it takes the mesh of the zombie, you know, the triangles that make up its model. It gives you the lighting effects, it gives you the ray tracing, it gives you all of the pretty like visual stuff on top of it. That means that it's not like just flat colors with triangles all over them. Okay, so let's say you're playing Doom Eternal on this new NVIDIA AI whatever the and your computer, your CPU, it's not very good. You can only run this at 15 frames per second. But good news, your GPU, because of the AI, can interpolate and get you 60 frames per second, okay? So what that means, your CPU is chugging and is only able to get that information out, only able to provide this packet of data about the world to the GPU at about a fourth the rate that you would want for smooth gameplay. But you don't experience that. Normally, if you were playing this at 15 frames per second, it would be chugging. You'd be like, you know? But every frame you get would be built off of a real, authentic set of data provided to the GPU by the CPU. What's happening now is you're moving smoothly, but the CPU is still doing this. So visually, you might be getting a smooth experience, but the packets of data are coming in slow. So what does that mean? Well, it might mean you're not getting consistent updates on the physical meshes of the things you're fighting. So this zombie might move a little bit, but the movement is just a visual illusion created by data interpolation on the part of the AI. It's not representative of underlying physics data. This means you can run into issues. You shoot where the zombie appears to be, but as soon as the CPU registers the shot, the zombie wasn't there. That was just an AI interpolation. You walk into a wall, and it's possible maybe the wall moves like it's a door or a moving vehicle or something, but it looks like you're moving smoothly, but the underlying information, it's just coming in too slowly. You'd get clipping issues. You'd get physics bugs. I think I get what Vaush is saying, but he's speaking about a theory that's not true to life anymore. Why don't you guys think it works this way? It does. It does. It does work this way. I'm giving it like I know I'm simplifying it, but no, you get added latency and unique visuals, but you don't break physics. You don't know. You don't know. You're getting one guide? No, I'm not. There were like a dozen people in chat who don't seem to understand that if you're working on GPU data that is disconnected from underlying like CPU physics data, you're going to run into issues. This is very straightforward. This AI stuff isn't being built by game devs, guys. It's being built by tech bros and venture capitalists. Like, I promise you, you're going to see a bunch of videos coming out from like the YouTube, Unity, Godot like devs you like, and they're going to be talking about how this like fundamentally breaks elements of games. I don't know why you're arguing with me on this. What's the incentive? I don't get it. This isn't even like a you move faster when the frame rate is lower thing. I'm just saying like you're not getting data from the CPU. Vaush is right about this being literally Satan, but Chet can't handle him not being a PhD in the subject. I mean, it's like a midwit thing, okay? Like, I understand that I'm not an expert in the subject, but I know I'm correct about this. Like, I just... The only bottleneck here is that the only problem here is that the GPU is usually the bottleneck, not the CPU. Generally, and for that I haven't really thought as much about, like the way in which a slow GPU performance being upscaled by AI could cause issues. I think the disconnect between CPU and GPU, like actual frame rate, is one thing. That would be like a separate thing. You're right. You're just terrible at explaining what you mean. You know what, Arcade? I think I actually explained it in a very straightforward way. I think that you're just being belligerent for no reason. I think that you're being deliberately antagonistic. I don't take that criticism, actually. I think the explanation was fine. The recent explanation was okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you for your permission. Thank you for turning your sideways pointing thumb upwards. Hesitantly, perhaps, but all the same, I appreciate you not killing me. Oh, Christ. Yeah, you explained it in a totally straightforward, totally wrong way. You notice that the people who are most rude about telling me that I'm wrong are the ones who don't explain why I'm wrong. Isn't that interesting? The people who are polite are usually the ones who have, like, a point to make, and the ones who have no point to make at all are the ones who just defer to being, like, rude and abrasive. It really makes you wonder about what they're compensating for. Vaush did a neurodivergent explanation. You're projecting! That was so simple! You can tell Vaush has become too comfortable behind a computer screen. You're projecting! What is wrong with you people? This is what you can't talk about gaming. Are you Asmongold fans? What is it with this genre of what is it with this subject that invites like the worst impulses from you people? Holy shit. Vaush mad? No, I am a little mad. And you know what? Unironically, I think that these point to like an underlying social tendency that explains where we are politically, okay? This kind of like reflexive abrasiveness born in, I'll say it, you know, dickless insecurity. This is exactly what brought us to this point, you know? Just because you lucked out and arrived at the technically correct political positions doesn't mean that you're not building those correct positions off an underlying like antagonistic worldview. It's antisocial behavior, okay? And you don't get a free pass on being a good or bad person just because you have the right political opinions. Or had a Ukraine flag, okay? You know what? I bet all the goddamn Russians stomping over your home turf, I bet you they'd agree with your position on this. I bet you they're also going on the game. I know those I know how they play with Dota and CSGO and what have you. Listen, winning the war in Ukraine means winning the war at home, and that means you guys accepting that I'm correct on this. Vaush, do you understand that physics processing depends on floating point arithmetic and that CPUs literally aren't very good? The rounding errors on the hex, the points, the rounding errors and the points. I know enough to know you're just saying stuff that you heard from a goddamn YouTube video. Everything you said is irrelevant because CPUs aren't good with the floating points. The number gets too long. You can't, the float loses precision the further out you get. That's what a float value is. They invented the float to contain both small and large numbers. I know how it all works, okay? Well enough to know when I'm being bullshitted. I'm not a doctor, but if I went to a doctor's office and they recommended homeopathy to cure my recurring cough, I would know enough to tell them to eat shit, okay? Why would we trust someone with your lack of experience and education on the topic? Totem cult. Where the fuck are you getting information from that contradicts mine? What the fuck do you mean? Why would we trust? I'm talking about video game graphics here. What the fuck are you talking about? How intelligent do you think you are? You're not Socrates. You're standing up to the church? What are you talking about? I just think that people in general are really antsy right now, and they really like feeling better than other people online. I think this is actually getting to be a worse community in like the online lefty, or at least left of center space, because it is objectively, like it is provably empirically true that people are getting stupider right now. Not like, oh, you know, in a boomer, you know, open the schools kind of way, but like there are materially like everything you could do to make people not as intelligent. Like those systems are being built out. People are getting dumber. And I think you go online and there's a reflex. Everyone wants to be smarter than the people they're seeing, right? It's like the irony brain rot where no one can enjoy media because they're too busy trying to like deconstruct the media and put it into tropes so they can feel smarter than the tropes, if you know what I mean. Like, this has been a thing for a while, but I think it's only gotten worse, at least over the past, like, 15 years, I feel. But it's the midwit position, right? Because, like, then you're basically indicating, like, you are too afraid of feeling or thinking to engage earnestly with that media, you know? Like, you're so desperate to categorize it to prove that you know enough to stand above it, that you're missing the point of the media. And in that case, you're failing the media literacy. You know what I mean? And anyway, I think that tendency kind of extends out into in a lot of directions. Because it's not just about disagreeing, it's like the abrasiveness, man. Oh my God. That's true, Shanghai. What a low trust environment does to MFs. That's pretty true. I love how none of this applies to Vaush himself, lol. So Marceline Flowers, that's actually exactly what I mean. At no point did I say that I'm not subject to this trend. You assumed that I was being, that I was lacking in self-awareness because that allowed you to feel like you had one up on me. At no point did I even imply that this didn't apply to me. I'm talking about a general trend here. And you took that, and your takeaway from that was, oh, well, I'm still one step above it because he doesn't know it applies to him, actually. And well, no, that was your assumption. You did exactly, like, it was kind of an 85 IQ move. You know what I mean? Charitability would have spared you this embarrassment because you could have thought, of course he's referring to himself. He hasn't said anything to the contrary. Why wouldn't he be referring to himself as well? But now you're here, humiliated, pants full of shit. I wouldn't want to be you. Crying for a mother. Yeah. Time to move on. This is politics, man. Some of it seems like a shortage of emotional skills as well. I just feel like people care more about proving they're right, whether or not they're right, than they do. Like, people just want to feel better than other people. I don't know. I think you might foster people being abrasive in chat because you don't say things like I think or I feel very much. You explain things abrasively. So I'll take partial credit on that, but there is an issue with this, and it's that I try to be constructive when I explain my opinions. And that's that I think is a very meaningful difference. Like, even if it's framed abrasively, the point I'm making, I'm genuinely trying to get across. I'm not just shitting on people until you're just being antagonistic to me, in which case I'm, you know, obviously like it's tit for tat at that point. I don't think it's that abrasive, though. I was complaining about NVIDIA AI frame interpolation. I mean, any mother named NVIDIA AI interpolation in chat? Was I insulting anyone personally with that one? Kid named NVIDIA AI interpolation. My dad is John GPU. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for him to get caught in the crossfire. I am John NVIDIA. Oh, that person in chat who I said fell for the classic trap and did the thing that I said they did by assuming that I wasn't referring to myself. You know what their response to my epic roast was? They said, here's your Reddit gold. Now that's a person who can't stand being criticized. Not even a sense of humor about it. That's what I mean, man. I think the difference between, and I'll say it, them and me is greater meaningfully than the difference between a left-leaning person and a right-leaning person. Like, I think that being left or right-leaning is an outer position built on a deeper, like, construct of being, which relates more to how you behave interpersonally. Like, there's a reason why antisocial behavior is so right-coded. You know what I mean? I think that's more predictive than anything.